Hey everyone, and welcome to the Scrappy Entrepreneur Show. Actually, welcome to the second season premiere of our show. Today, we have a really good one for you. But before we get started, I really just want to take a moment and thank everybody for tuning into our first season and for the amazing feedback that you guys all provide me. For the comments, the emails, the reviews. The first season was really just getting our feet wet and a big learning curve, but we had so much fun along the way. And we hope to deliver even more value for you now this second season. So please, I cannot encourage you enough to please keep the feedback coming. Send me your thoughts on the show, please. Any feedback, people you guys want to hear, subjects you want to hear about. I really want to hear back from you, my listeners. I know our listening base is growing all around the world because I see the stats. And I really, really do want to hear from you. So please go to my website at scrappyentrepreneurs.net and you can send me an email or DM me on my Instagram, which is Paula Yakubik, PaulaYakubik. I'm going to say that again because it's hard. Paula Yakubik, PaulaYakubik, or hit me up on Facebook. All right, let's get into the show. Today, my guest is Scott Bradlee. Scott is an American musician turned entrepreneur by the way of social media. He founded and currently runs Postmodern Jukebox, known for reworking popular music into different vintage genres. He is best known for his viral videos on YouTube and his musical touring company. Bradlee's YouTube channel has amassed over 1.4 billion views, and he has over 5 million subscribers. He also has a live show that tours the world with 70 different performers, and up until COVID hit, Postmodern Jukebox was touring around the world with more than 300 shows annually. What is so inspiring in this story is listening to Scott's life, career, and success unfold just like a piece of music. Scott is a brilliant entrepreneur. He possesses strong attributes and characteristics of successful founders, CEOs, and business owners, which is why, despite struggling as a musician, he has found amazing, widespread success. Really, I kept thinking while I was taping this interview that things that took me 20 years to figure out, Scott Bradlee seemed to seamlessly have it woven into his nature. He really does have the growth mindset. He has no ego. He's so resilient. He never will give up. He knew early on how to build a team. He knew how to pull out collaboration and what it means for a company. He understands consistency and hard work, all before anyone even taught him any of this. This episode delivers and drops some of our best advice yet for entrepreneurs, no matter what line of business you're in. Scott was born in 1981, and his story begins in a small town in New Jersey.
Yeah, my parents were musically inclined, but they weren't musicians themselves. I get a lot of people asking me about that, but my mom was a school teacher, but she also played guitar and she played violin. She was a Spanish teacher. And my dad was a computer programmer, but he dabbled in some trumpet. He would, play trumpet and things like that. So they both played a lot of music for me as a kid. A lot of 60s stuff, a lot of, a pretty diverse playlist of things. And I always, reacted well to music. I always liked it, just as a little kid, and I had like a little toy keyboard and, that was fun. And my first album was Michael Jackson's Bad. And my first cassette was MC Hammer's Please Hammer Don't Hurt 'Em. So that says a lot about where I was musically at that time, I think. And,
Scott admits he wasn't really that into music as a kid, but started music lessons at age 9. But was later dropped by his music teacher because of a lack of dedication. But then, a revelation. At age 12, he came across Rhapsody in Blue. A musical composition by George Gershwin, known for its integration of jazz rhythms with classical music. Scott was instantly hooked. He wanted to learn more on how to incorporate jazz into the piano.
And that just kind of, changed my mind completely. I was like, oh my God, well, I didn't know that I could do this on the piano. I want to learn how to do this and make that sound. So I didn't really, know where this was going to lead or anything like that. And I didn't really even set out to become a musician. It just kind of, this was an interest that I had at the time when I was 12. And then I started, going to the library. I would take out all these old CDs and cassettes of all these jazz artists, focusing primarily on the early stuff, like New Orleans era, Jelly Roll Morton, Fats Waller, those guys, Louis Armstrong. And I would listen to them, and I would sit at the piano and try to pick out what they were doing. And I was, listening specifically to the pianists, trying to figure out, okay, how did they make that sound? And it was kind of like a very brute force method of learning. There wasn't really a teacher that was guiding me in the jazz realm at this time. So I just became, kind of like at first just a mimic, like you're learning anything else, like when you're a baby and you're learning to speak, you start by mimicking. I was trying to copy things that I heard and how to do that. And then gradually I'd be able to, I started to learn a little bit about improvisation, like how I could make little subtle alterations to things that I heard and kind of put my own spin on something. And that was kind of that's the building blocks of learning to play jazz.
As Scott moved through high school, he continued to study and be very passionate about jazz. But as a kid growing up in the 90s, he found soul and hip hop and R&B. That's what most of his friends liked. As any high schooler could attest, trying to fit in is hard. But for Scott, trying to fit in would be the launching point for what later would be Scott's very successful career.
What was kind of helpful to me, I guess, during that time is that my friends weren't really into jazz. They had their own types of music that they liked. So I would kind of bridge the gap by learning the songs that they liked and play them in the styles that I liked. So it was this party trick that I had. I would play like a Notorious B.I.G. song and I'd play it as ragtime, or I'd take like a Red Hot Chili Peppers song and play it like swing jazz or something like that. And it always it gave everybody it was a kick. They got a kick out of that because they knew the songs, they recognized the songs, but they're like, how do I know this? And then there's that light bulb moment. They're like, whoa, I can't believe that, that's the song, but it's played in this like old style. And
wow.
So that was really, that was kind of the seed that later became, what I do, or what I'm known for doing.
Scott then went on to college at Hartford, Connecticut, where he majored in music business, another key to his future. While there, he started buying his own recording gear and he began experimenting and recording his own album. After graduation, he headed off to the Big Apple.
I definitely wanted to be a musician, and I was really stoked on moving to New York City. And I really believed at the time, I'm like, I'm just going to take New York City by storm. I'm going to play in all the top jazz clubs and, get a record deal and all this stuff. And the reality is when I got to New York, I just found that it was a very saturated market for jazz. I mean, you have some of the best jazz players in the world, and they're all in one city. Like it's incredibly competitive. And for me, I was largely, I couldn't really find any work. And, when I did get work, it was like, a wedding cocktail hour, something like that. It was playing piano in the corner of a restaurant where nobody's listening. I mean, it's things like that. That was kind of like my experience. So it wound up being initially a very demoralizing experience.
So when you got to New York, how did you start? Did you just start reaching out to different venues to apply for a job, or how does it work in New York City as a musician?
I guess there's no real playbook. I tried a lot of different methods. I would send out demos, which I'm sure nobody opened. I would visit places like every catering hall or anything like that. I would give them my business card and my demo and just be like, I'm available for any wedding cocktail hours and things like that. I taught piano lessons, things like that, some music classes, wherever I could find some work that way. And, it was really, it's a freelancer life. You have to be willing to take a lot of different types of jobs, so I did a lot of different things in music here and there, but it was very inconsistent.
Mm-hmm. So then you ended up one day in a garage in Astoria, New York City with a bunch of your friends. Can you tell me about that?
Well, I'll back it up a little bit. So it wasn't a garage technically, it was a basement. Close enough.
Okay.
But so I was renting a place. I had this landlord named Agatha, who was, she was really funny. She was a character, and she called me Daniel. Just she would forget my name, and she would always bring me food. She had a very maternal instinct, that she would just always want to feed me all the time. So she'd be like, Daniel, I give you a whole vat of peas. It was like 5 gallons of peas and stuff like that. And so I'm like, what am I going to do with this giant vat of peas? And then I would just like eat for a week off of just peas, you know. It was pretty funny. But it was a basement that had a lot of space for me to set up all my gear and all my you know, recording equipment and my keyboard and stuff. So for me, it was perfect just being a musician. Like, I loved it there. And so around, you know, this time, we're talking about 2009. At this point, I had almost given up on music in a way. I was working as a musician and I was playing, you know, restaurant gigs and things like that. But I had kind of made the decision I wanted to go back to school, maybe study something else. You know, I wanted to try to see if I could get you know, study physics so I could have some kind of, you know, a real world job, like a real job. And I was kind of treating music less and less as like my profession and a little bit more like a hobby. And that's around the time that, you know, I was seeing some other, mostly amateur musicians having success on YouTube. And, you know, YouTube during this time was a very different landscape. YouTube it wasn't like, you know, real music videos. It wasn't like The Tonight Show or Marvel movie trailers. It was mostly just cat videos. And I saw that, you know, there were some musicians, like people jamming in their bedroom or something like that on a guitar or something, and was getting lots of views. And prior to that, I always thought of myself, I'm like, wow, that's so unprofessional. Like, I want to be a professional. I take my job seriously. These are people that are amateur. But then it dawned on me that I was really not really a professional. I mean, I was barely making a living. So I didn't really have any right to call myself a professional musician. And that kind of freed me up, you know, let me let go of my own ego to just record something that was fun and put it on YouTube. So I decided to record this medley of 80s songs, you know, everything from Never Gonna Give You Up to Material Girl to Don't Stop Believing, like in medley format, and do it all as ragtime piano. And you know, I just set up a cheap little camcorder on a tripod, sat behind my keyboard and just recorded this thing. And, you know, just put it online and just see where it went. I just figured if nothing else, I would have a good kind of online business card that I could send to places, you know, like, oh, hire a pianist for your party. He takes songs and turns them into ragtime. So it was really just revisiting that party trick that I did in high school.
So you just started a YouTube channel and then started uploading your videos.
Yeah. So that one video, and what happened was, you know, at first I shared it on Facebook, and I mean, it got maybe like, I don't know, 100 views or something like that, friends and family and stuff. And it was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then the next day, you know, I went to work teaching some music classes. And then on like my lunch break, I checked that video just to see if there were any comments from my friends and stuff. And I saw that it had 10,000 views and
wow,
tons of comments, you know, and it took me a second to even figure out what had happened. I wasn't even really sure. I thought it was a mistake or something. And everybody in the comments, you know, they were saying, Neil sent me. I'm like, who's Neil? You know, and then I found out that it was Neil Gaiman, the writer, who had tweeted this when it only had about 100 views. And all of a sudden, you know, got me all this traffic. And, you know, just looking, there were all these comments, and I mean, it's internet comments. So, you know, most of them were great. Some of them were crazy. And then there was also just a lot of people that were making requests, which I thought was so interesting. Like they were saying, why don't you do this, but with songs of the 90s? Or why don't you do this, but make it a medley of whatever, you know, Disney songs or something. And that was the first time that people really engaged with my piano playing in that way. You know, prior to this, I was used to just playing in the corner of a restaurant, nobody listening. And this time, this was something different. There were more people that watched me through that video than had watched me play in my entire life before this.
Right.
And it was the main event. It wasn't background music. It was something that they were actively discussing and, you know, giving suggestions of how to improve or whatever. And I realized that there was something there. I didn't know what it was, but there was something I wanted to explore just because I saw that level of engagement.
Yeah, Scott. So you're on your lunch hour and you see the 10,000 views. Like, what initially did you think? Were you really excited? Were you like, I got to do more of this? Did you want to run home and start putting up more videos? What was going on in your mind?
I mean, yeah, definitely all those things. It was, you know, first it was just confused. I was like, how did this, what is this? What does this mean? And then I saw, you know, it was getting picked up by some like, you know, all these viral video sites. If you remember like College Humor and things like that, that were during that time. You know, within a few days, they were all running it, and the view count was growing on this thing. And You know, at first I was like, what, does this mean I'm famous? Am I going to get recognized? No, it doesn't mean that. You're not going to get recognized. So I let go of that pretty fast. But, and I knew that at this point, I didn't have any way to monetize it. So that wasn't really a thing. It wasn't thinking at the time like that I was going to make money on this video. But I did see that this had potential to be a career path somehow, you know? I wasn't really sure how. So, you know, my next steps were, okay, let me learn more about this idea of creating viral content. That's really how I framed it. You know, not even so much from the music perspective, but as much as viral content. You know, how does it travel? How do people find these things? Started making a list of all these different media outlets that ran this kind of stuff. There was a lot at that time. You know, this is really before social media was really dominant.
Right.
So I started learning how things travel and, you know, people that I could pitch these videos to and stuff, and also just seeing what people reacted to. So I would try different things, you know, like one time I would record something. I'm like, what if I put an old timey filter on this? So this looks like it's you know, something that was recorded a long time ago. You know, how does that affect the view count? How does the title, you know, I mean, this is around the era where I guess clickbait, the idea of clickbait was really starting at this time. So it was like, how do I, you know, title something that is catchy enough that people are going to want to open it up and see what this is? Things like that. And then the other thing that I started doing was gradually inviting some friends to be a part of this. So other musicians that I knew, you know, whether it was like a saxophone player that I played gigs with, and it's like, let's go, you know, do like the Mario Brothers song, but do it as jazz or something. Let's do our own jazz version of it. You know, these little small collaborations. And
did you have to pay them, or were you just inviting them in as friends?
I mean, initially, yeah, it was just, I think pretty much just as friends in the very early days.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, then gradually I got a budget. You basically pay people in falafel sandwiches for a second, you know, in the very early days. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't really, you know, much thought of this even being a viable business. I was just kind of creating content for the sake of, you know, just enjoying the conversation that it, you know, it kind of engendered, and also hoping that this would lead to some kind of future career prospect in some capacity. I just wasn't sure what yet.
Yeah, so it sounds like you were doing some early A/B testing with your headlines, and you were really studying up on how to,
Yeah, total A/B testing. Absolutely.
Yeah. And had they taught you that in school, or you're just kind of you're tinkering around trying to figure out what's working, right?
No, yeah, it just felt kind of natural. You know, it's just, it just seemed like that was a logical thing to try to do, you know, to see how that, and especially, you know, with YouTube, you're given analytics and things like that. So it was cool to see in the back end, you could see like how, you know, like, oh, that, you know, just reading just a graph of how many views you got per day, that would teach you something.
Right. So tell me about the video that really went viral. How did that happen?
So the first one, I mean, I had a few like kind of, I guess, minor league viral successes. I had this thing that I did a Motown tribute to Nickelback. And so it's exactly what it sounds like. It was taking all of Nickelback's songs and re-envisioning them as if they were recorded during the Motown era. And, you know, that was something that actually got us a festival gig. We got hired to play a Live Nation festival in Canada as a Motown tribute to Nickelback based on one video, which is pretty funny.
So they just called you and said, hey, we saw your video?
Yeah, they were trying not to laugh because they just thought it was so ridiculous. And I was like, you know, well, we could do this, but I just want to let you know, we're not a real band. This is just like a viral. They're like, yeah, I know. But can you do a whole set of those? I'm like, oh, I guess I could. So
do you remember what you were paid for that?
Geez, no, I don't even remember that. But, you know, I don't think we made any money on that, really. I think it was more of just covering the cost of getting the band over there to Canada and stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, but we had a blast. I mean, it was the most fun thing when we stepped on the stage, and, you know, everybody in Canada, everybody knew the words to these songs. So it felt like that they were singing along to us, you know, just, they weren't, it was Nickelback. But, you know, we had a blast doing that. And that was, you know, kind of our first, that was my first big live show, which is kind of crazy. And then around this time also, another project that I got involved with that came as a direct result of that first video that I made was the video game BioShock Infinite. Mm-hmm. So Irrational Games, which produced this game, had contacted me and hired me to do kind of concept music. And they had, these concepts that was basically the same idea of what I was doing. So it was taking songs, something like Shiny Happy People by REM, or Tainted Love, or Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears, and recasted them as if they were recorded in, I think it was like 1914 or something like that. So, so it's just really, it was at the time, it was top secret project, because of the game was in development. But it was the most exciting thing, it was my first big gig, really, like I got hired as an arranger essentially, and a pianist instead of just a pianist. And part of what that gig involved was I got to meet with some different vocalists, and we recorded some songs with vocalists, which up until that point, I don't think that I had done, not recording wise. So one of the singers was Mickey Braden, and she's this just Motown legend. She literally grew up in Motown, singing on some of those records and stuff. And she had been on this off-Broadway show. She starred in this one-woman show called The Devil's Music, The Life and Times of Bessie Smith. And she has this big blues voice, and she just nails that Bessie Smith style. And we worked together on a couple of songs for the game. We worked on Tainted Love. So we kind of did a Bessie Smith version of Tainted Love. And I recorded the piano part, and then we recorded with her in New York City, and she was in the vocal booth and she's singing to my piano part. And I just had chills because I'd never heard anybody with that kind of voice, this huge voice, singing to my piano before. I think before that, I always thought it was, I don't want to work with vocalists. Like they just mess up my solos, I don't do jazz. But then my eyes were really opened as a result of that experience, because it sounded amazing. And what she brought to the arrangement that I had created was it was next level.
Then one day, Scott had an idea to tape a version of Macklemore's Thrift Shop. So he called his then girlfriend Robin and a couple of bandmates over to his basement.
So yeah, it wasn't any kind of formal band or anything like that. It was like how I treated pretty much all those videos. It was like I would call just some of my friends up and be like, hey, I want to record a version of this, like let's work on putting some sheet music together. In this case, Robin had come up with a little bit of a vocal melody, like turning the rap into like a melody. And and I just, basically just did it like anything else. So I just hit record on the camcorder, I hit record on my recording equipment, jumped back behind the piano, and we just recorded a few takes until we found one that we were happy with.
Wow. And then you uploaded it to YouTube?
Yeah. And I had, at this time, I had a little bit of a following on my channel, but it wasn't big. I don't know how many followers I had or subscribers or whatever. But, this was Robin's first time singing really publicly in that sense. She wasn't at that time a singer. She did it for fun. She was really talented, but she just would, she would sing at karaoke and things like that. And I cautioned her. I was like, hey, some of these things, this might get like 10,000 views, and there might be crazy comments and stuff because it's the internet, and that's what the internet is. So I was trying to kind of brace her for, the idea that this could go viral, which I thought meant 10,000 views. And instead it got 1 million views in a week. So
1 million in the first week?
Yeah.
So tell me about that when you opened up your computer, looked in your computer, and there was 1 million views. Like, what was going through your mind?
It was pretty wild. It was a very surreal experience because at the time, YouTube, the algorithm was different, and they would show you just the most watched videos every day. They would show you like the top 10 or whatever. And we were number 3 that day.
Wow.
So the top video was like, I don't know, probably a cat video again, some cat doing something. Then it was followed by like some kind of celebrity video. Maybe it was like, I don't know, Katy Perry or somebody. I don't really remember. And then it was us. It was like, my kitchen basically. So it was such a weird experience to have that. And this is very telling of how YouTube was at that time, how easy it was to, I shouldn't say easy, but you had a better chance of going viral and being seen by everybody, you know, as opposed to now where it is a little bit more like mainstream media in that it's more curated. It's more, you're seeing big movie studios and things like that tend to be releasing things that go viral as opposed to just random people in their kitchen.
Right. So when you were uploading these videos, you know, with artists that were obviously, you know, these artists that you were redoing their songs were very famous. Did you ever worry about the permissions from the artists or licensing fees
Not
or
really. No, I mean, we, you know, anything that we released, we would, I pay mechanical royalties on. So, you know, there's a pretty straightforward licensing process there.
so what were your first thoughts after it went viral with 1 million views? Were there any other things that you started rethinking for the business or saying, okay, what's the next step?
Well, I knew that I wanted to venture into live performance because I knew that that was really I mean, anything that's on YouTube, I mean, it's somewhat, YouTube is not the most stable place to, or just anywhere in social media. If you only exist online, it's not really like a full brand in the same way that is if you exist online, but also in the real world. So I wanted to
Right.
make that jump, you know, and I mean, that took basically about a year before we made that jump. But I was already thinking at that time, okay, so can we, you know, how do we branch this out into the real world where we can actually, you know, make some money as performers and stuff? And I think that, let's see, in the very early days, you know, around the time that these videos were going viral at first, we started getting calls for private events. And that was the, you know, the way that we were able to monetize it. You know, we would get called for, you know, there were just different events that people were having. If anything that was, you know, Gatsby themed, I think the Great Gatsby movie came out around that time.
Okay.
So there was a lot of Gatsby themed events and people just saw us on YouTube and they'd be like, oh, I wonder if we can, you know, get this hip YouTube band to play our event.
Were you monetizing YouTube at this point?
Yeah, but views they don't really, that's not your best way of monetizing. It doesn't really amount to much. I mean, the royalties are so low there.
Even now with 1 billion hits?
I mean, yeah, it's not great. I mean, you know, I guess it's good. You know, I think that your best sources still as a musician it's always going to be live performance.
Right.
And I just don't think there's a way around it. And then followed by, I think that, you know, there's pros and cons to streaming. Certainly streaming has been able to, because it's so widespread, it's been able to make up some of the shortfall that, you know, when people started moving away from owning albums and buying albums and actually downloading albums. But, you know, it's all getting lower as a result, you know, in terms of just basically the way to, if you really want to make money on streaming and stuff, you have to have a catalog. You have to have a big catalog of stuff. And
Okay.
because playlisting is so huge. So,
Right.
so in that sense, yeah, I mean, you know, we can make good income. I can, you know, have these playlists and things like that and generate more royalties through that.
Now, with 1 million views, the group records a Miley Cyrus song, We Can't Stop, which now has over 24 million views, and a song by Royals with Puddles the Singing Clown. These two videos project Scott so high, Good Morning America calls. So what were you thinking when Good Morning America called? Did a producer call you and say, hey, Scott, we love your music, we want you to come on?
Well, yeah, it was actually ABC World News had, I think, called us right before that too. And they asked if they could come to my studio, you know, meaning my kitchen, you know, to record an interview. And I was like, yeah. So we had a camera crew in my, you know, this was like a residential apartment building. So all the other people were like, what's going on? Like, did something happen in this building that there's like a camera crew here and stuff? I'm like, why are they going into this person's apartment? Which is very sketchy. And then I think that interview got bumped. I don't think it ever aired. I think there was a car chase or something that bumped it.
Right.
But they also, I think, Good Morning America, I believe that's ABC as well, right? So I think
Yes.
the producers, there was some kind of crosstalk between them, like, well, let's get them on Good Morning America. And a producer of the show reached out to us to invite us to be the house band, essentially. That's how they termed it. It's like, you know, instead of just doing like one live performance, like we'll have you do a featured performance, but we'll have you play the bumpers, you know. So right before you go to commercial, we'll play a little something, and, you know, they would clear the songs and stuff so we could play these modern day pop songs just with this vintage twist.
Was it just for the day or was it an ongoing gig?
No, it was just for the day.
Oh, awesome. I mean, you just
Yeah.
must have been so excited. Good Morning
Yeah,
America.
it was crazy. Yeah. I mean, it was, very nerve wracking experience because, this is our first time. Yeah, this is my first time doing live TV. Uh, for all of us, everybody that participated in that, I believe. And live TV is very early. Like this show, I mean, we were up at like 4 a.m. having to head over there, and it was kind of funny that uh, they were like, yeah, we're gonna have a limo pick you up and everything. And we were all excited about all this stuff. And it turned out it wasn't a limo exactly. It was like I forgot what it was, but it was like the first indication that, oh, this is Hollywood, but,
Right. It's
you
does
know,
it's not as great as it seems, or
right. Yeah. I mean, it was very nice. It was very nice. And,
yeah.
but it was very surreal. Like we're talking, getting out of the car, getting into, the green room and everything. Everything's very bright. It's television. Everybody's very caffeinated. Everybody's on, high energy and stuff. And, we're just all just shell shocked, and everybody's so good at their job. Everybody, the host and everything, they're so on it. They know how to just move from one thing to another. Everything's very fast. Cameras are moving around, they're checking your sound. There's like a whole team of people that are, they're touching you up, just all this stuff. You got to do hair and makeup on all this, that stuff.
Yeah.
It's a very overwhelming experience. And then, they just like count you down. They're like, all right, you're on, now play, So it was a very, it was intense.
So you're on Good Morning America, and your work is starting to be covered by PBS NewsHour and Huffington Post and Billboard. And did all of this PR earned media publicity really start contributing to your overall success, would you say?
Well, I recognize now that was kind of when we kind of broke, right? I guess every band or anything that just, goes on to become successful, they have a time that media catches on to them,
Mhm.
it was funny that we broke back then because, we didn't start touring until 2014. So at this time, we didn't even really know what we were. People were just calling us a band, or some people were calling us a music collective. There was no real, thought of what it was, because we always had, we had different musicians that would make videos with us and things. And there wasn't really a thought at that time of how exactly I could do the show. I had kind of an idea in my head. But that's around that time that I got a manager that reached out to me, Jaron Lowenstein.
Mm.
And he reached out to me and just wanted to talk about it. He's like, just thought it was brilliant. He was very high energy, so I talked to him on the phone, and he just ran down all these ideas of like how I could, and I realized he was articulating the vision for a live show. And it was kind of the same stuff that I was thinking of. Like, wouldn't it be cool if, you could make this show where it's like, it's today's pop culture, but it's back in time, and you're going into the show and you feel like you're back in time, and you're really, the only thing is there's a twist to it, that it's these songs that you hear that are on the radio today, that you would never expect to hear in these styles. And, it's a very visual show as well, and that everybody's in costumes that are from that era, and the audience can be dressing up. And we just kind of thought about all these different possibilities of where we could take this brand. And so that was really where the pieces started to fall into place.
So did you hire him?
Yeah. So I started working with him. I mean, I had this conversation. I think he talked my ear off for 2 hours. I think I said maybe 30 words, but he was so hyped up. He was so excited. And I was like, this guy might be crazy, but he definitely sounds brilliant. So let's
And
bring him in.
passionate, huh? About your music.
Absolutely. Yeah. So then he was, I was in New York at the time. He was based in LA, but he was always just emailing me with ideas and things, and, helping to negotiate contracts that I already had in place of, things like for private events and things that we did.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Did you continue to use the power of social media to build your brand at that time?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, that was the driver of the business, 100%. We were still doing, I don't think we were doing weekly videos at this time yet. We were doing maybe 2 a month or 1 a month or something like that. But we started to move into doing weekly videos, and we started kind of expanding the talent pool. We had all these different singers that would collaborate us. And from different worlds too. We would have like Broadway singers, Broadway stars that would come by. We'd have people that were known, for other things that we brought in tap dancers. We brought in, somebody that played a flaming saxophone that had like a flamethrower inside of it, all kinds of different stuff. And the idea was to kind of create this world online where you're always going to hear a different song. It's all these modern day pop songs, but they're all reimagined in this vintage world.
So it's so great because as running your own business, you're getting the power of social media behind you. You don't know it at the time, but this big PR arm is generating for you, and then you actually begin touring, correct?
So that happened, in 2014. So 2014 is where we booked. I got with my agency, ICM, and my agents Scott Mantell and Craig Bruck, they helped book the very first tour, which was kind of like a run of, I think we did 8 shows in maybe 6 cities. I think it was, smaller rooms, rooms. But it sold out fast. And, the idea for the live show was, okay, I wanted to take this YouTube channel, which is very diverse in its offerings, and turn it into a show that kind of represents the real world version of what my YouTube channel is. So that was a little bit challenging. I decided, we got to take a cast that's bigger than usual. You can't take it can't be like a 5-person band, I think we want to bring in close to a dozen performers. So that it's all these different performers. We have to have a pretty, it's a big but small band, like we have a horn section, but it's only 2 horns, things like that. And we brought a tap dancer that, provides a great just visual hook because it's so fun to watch, but it also is a rhythmic instrument. So, that became, that's kind of our version of an EDM like light show that DJs would employ. We just have a tap dancer. And then, we had a cast with an MC and all these different vocalists that are meant to represent the different vocal styles that we put on the channel. Some are jazz singers, some are soul singers, some are, kind of more like variety artists. And that was our first tour. We were in a van basically, but like a nice van, it was pretty comfortable, and staying at lots of La Quintas and, across the greater Northeast. And it went so well that we were approached to expand the tour into a European tour of over 20 cities.
Wow.
And that was made possible basically because we had a private event. There was a wedding that we were playing out there in Monaco that basically covered the costs, or at least most of the cost of, the bus and things like that.
So let me ask you this. So your YouTube channel, like you said, there's analytics and everything on the back end. Were you able to look at that to figure out who your fan base was? When, you're moving through these cities, you guys are doing, and I know you probably, like you said, you had a company helping you, but did you have a grasp as to who your fan base was? A demographic breakdown?
I mean, we kind of leaned on that in the early, it's not a direct correlation because again, it's just, YouTube is one platform, Facebook's another platform, and it tends to be the same, different demographics on different platforms. But we found that, we kind of got a hint that our audience was all ages essentially, because there was a lot of young people that were into it because they knew the modern day songs and they enjoyed the vintage aspect of, the cosplay aspect, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term.
Right.
But then the flip side is there were older people that were super into it because they just loved just hearing, this kind of music. Like it was music that wasn't heard on the radio. Right. So they were hearing just people playing real instruments. There were awesome singers that reminded them of maybe music that they listened to in the past. So, and then I think the most interesting part about the audience was I remember our very first show, and it was in Toronto. And at this point, I hadn't really met any PMJ fans in real life, or very few. We did like, people in New York that might have heard about the project or had seen some of the videos, but they were mostly friends of friends at that time. Mm-hmm. But this was a city that I had never been to. And I had no, I guess I was just, I was really interested to see if there were any fans that were going to show up. I mean, they told us we sold out, the show, but I was like, I've never really met anybody like from Toronto that's a PMJ. Like, I've never been here. Maybe this is just people showing up for concerts. Maybe they're not actually PMJ fans that know what we do. Maybe this is normal, And we got out there, we got on stage, and everybody goes nuts. And the audience, a big part of the audience was dressed vintage, just like us. And we had never messaged that. That was never a thing that we told people to do.
Wow.
And it was wild. It was so unexpected. And I realized, whoa, this is a thing. Like, it means something to people here. People were giving us standing ovations. They were so excited to meet us after the show and hang out with us, which is funny now, like during the pandemic. I don't know when you're going to air this, but during the pandemic, it seems so distant, the idea of doing a meet and greet and shaking hands and stuff. But, we felt like rock stars. It was a pretty wild thing. And just to think that we only existed on the internet before that, and we had never really seen our fans in real life, that it was like them meeting us for the first time and we were meeting them for the first time.
In May 2018, Postmodern Jukebox surpasses into 1 billion views on YouTube, and the business continues to grow. But it started to hit some challenges and barriers where Scott learned to manage and run a business and keep it fresh.
I think it's a testament of, if you put in a lot of hard work, and, everybody on my team has, and you're consistent about it, that you can really, you can take something that might be an unlikely success story, which is the idea of taking modern day pop songs and turning them into something vintage, and really, scale it beyond your wildest imagination.
So when you say scale upon your wildest imagination, tell me, and let's take the pandemic out of it. How big did you get? Like, how many employees? Can you tell us how big you built the business?
I think that it's a small team in terms of, other than the touring side, which is, of course, on every tour, we are bringing lots of musicians in, lots of tour managers, and, kind of employing a lot of people in that regard.
Right.
But I think the way that I think of it as of how it's scaled is just, in the early days, we, once we started touring, we never looked back. It just became us adding new cities and new countries and new continents. So we've been to, at this point, every continent except for Antarctica. We've been to some cities 8, 9 times. We've played some pretty big places, in places like Radio City Music Hall and Red Rocks and things like that. And we featured, I think, well over 100 at this point, musicians and singers and dancers on the road, which is, such a cool thing. It's become this kind of community, to the point that where other people that meet on a PMJ tour, they start their own side projects and things, and they're like their own kind of offshoots and, things like that. It's really become this kind of beautiful artistic community, which is, a pretty powerful thing. And so it's done all those things. And it's also really given our audience something pretty cool to look forward to. Basically, it's a time for them to go and come together and just listen to all this great music and celebrate all this amazing talent that, for whatever reason might not be heard on the radio right now, or might not be on MTV, if MTV is still a thing. I don't even know.
What's been the biggest challenge building the business?
Yeah, I think that, well, it's the people business for sure. So there's always challenges in that. And it's also, it's music, it's the arts and everything like that. So, certainly when you're working with casts and things like that, and you're bringing in, people, the idea is, it's something that I learned in working at Sleep No More. That was my first time managing people, is that you want to always foster an environment where people feel that they can be creative and they can contribute, without overtaking, the project or steering the project elsewhere or something like that. So right. I think that's always a balance. And, when you're touring is hard. You're in a bus with a dozen people, that's a challenge in and of itself. That will make anybody go a little, I think that there's that aspect, but I don't think that that's necessarily the biggest challenge. I think that for us, for just any kind of business, after 7 years or something like that, wanting to be able to always feel like you're doing things that are new and keeping things fresh while not abandoning what got you to the dance, you know?
Right.
So I think that that's something that I always think about. There's so many possibilities within the concept of postmodern jukebox because it is largely open-ended. It's, you know, it's today's hits yesterday. And that can mean so many different things. And there's so many different ways that we can kind of achieve it. And I'm always looking for new spins that we can, you know, put on the concept. And a lot of times, I mean, that's why I enjoy collaborating with people so much and working with all these different singers, because they are coming with their own life experiences and their own ideas. And a lot of times that opens my mind to possibilities I didn't even know existed, you know?
Yeah.
So somebody might come in and suggest we cover this song that I didn't know about. And, you know, I'll look into it and they're like, oh yeah, what if we did this? And it's like Doo-wop, or if it's like, you know, the swing thing, and it's things like that, where you're getting to really be collaborative. And I think that that's really the key to staying fresh in a lot of ways.
So, you know, the pandemic hits, and it's obviously that you're so business minded and a true entrepreneur at heart. And, you know, you've said that you have passion for helping people, but during this time, you've actually done something to help entrepreneurs. So you have released something on, I think, a musician rescue kit. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So that was, yeah, there was a few things that we did right after the pandemic hit. So it's kind of crazy. So we were on the road at that time. And I think we were kind of in the same place that everybody else was, where we went from not even really thinking that this coronavirus was going to be a thing to being like, oh no, we got to get everybody off the road like immediately. And
Right.
that happened in early March, and we were only a few shows in on the tour. And, you know, I remember one day kind of checking in with the cast, like, how's everybody feeling about this? Like, I'm trying to look into, you know, if this is something that we need to think about canceling. And everybody was like, oh no, it's been fine. We've been doing meet and greets, you know, nobody's worried about this or anything like that. And then I think the next day I had a conversation with somebody that had gotten, you know, information from, I guess, some scientists and things like that about how this was going to play out and how out of control this was. And I made the decision right there, we got to pull everybody off the road immediately. And we just brought everybody home. We canceled the rest of the tour, you know, or postponed the dates to whenever, you know, things clear up, just because, you know, safety was the most important thing. And
Right.
especially as a band that has an all ages demographic, we have a lot of older fans and things. So we wanted to make sure that they were safe. So that was wild. That happened so fast. I mean, it was like a 24-hour period. And I believe that, was it the next day or 2 days after that, Live Nation canceled all of their tours. And then NFL or NBA, or I forget which organization was that canceled their whole season. And then I saw that like Broadway, I think a few days later, they shut all their shows. Yeah, so it was like everything, it just became a wave of everybody coming to the same realization.
Yeah.
So that was a wild thing. But yeah, so, you know, where my mind went was just understanding just that musicians, I mean, entertainers and nightlife and all that stuff, that's the last stuff that's going to come back.
Right.
Just because of the nature of it, there's not a real great way to social distance a concert, you know?
Yeah.
And that means that when venues come back, if they're going to do that, you know, I guess they'd have to do every other seat or something like that. None of the solutions are really ideal, and it's a very difficult problem. And, you know, I'm confident that there's going to be a solution to this problem, whether it's through vaccines or what have you. But in the meantime, you know, I want to kind of give musicians the tools that they need to have kind of a side hustle, you know, where they can actually make money through their music, but using online tools. And there's a whole bunch of them. And I kind of came from it, you know, I discovered all that stuff just because I started on YouTube and I got into live streaming very early. And I learned about, you know, platforms like Stage It and other things like that early on. But now all those tools are becoming increasingly important, especially this year, because it's really all we got. So the Musician Rescue Kit basically details a plan of, you know, actionable things that you can do to make money with your music online. And, you know, everything from things that can generate some royalties to some substitutes for live performance. I mentioned Stage It. There's some other ones too. To crowdfunding, things like Patreon or Kickstarter or anything like that that can help cover the cost of content that you're creating. And then, just other tips about engagement and just general principles about building a following.
So where does that come from inside you, Scott? Like, are you just like, you've built up your brand, you became widely known through some of the steps probably that you put in the rescue kit, but where does it come to help other struggling artists?
Well, arts is a community, first and foremost. Nobody really exists without the community in that sense. So, I knew that during this time, I want to keep people working as much as I can. And we've done some opportunities for the musicians too. We did a couple of kind of live stream concerts to benefit, the PMJ folks, just the musicians that would normally be on tour with us that can't tour now because of coronavirus. So, we want to be able to help musicians as much as we can during this time because, that can be scary, right? People that are looking at not being able to work essentially in their field, that they've dedicated their whole life to for
Right.
a year or more. I think that's pretty, it's pretty sobering.
Right. So you have a friend named Mike Southern, and he said in one of his writing pieces, he said, quote, "Another key challenge for successful entrepreneurs is planning your own replacement with people you completely trust." So I know we talked a little bit about the future of PMJ and what is the future and where do you see yourself? I mean, how does that eventually happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't really thought too much about that just because I've been having so much fun working with PMJ.
Right.
It's one of those ones where when I sit down and think about it, I'm like, wow, I'm doing exactly what I wanted to do. Being
That's
able to
amazing.
be an arranger and being able to produce all these different, just all these fun pieces of content and work with so many creative, just talented people. So yeah, for me, I'm just having a blast, to be honest, with all that stuff. I'd say that, yeah, in terms of that quote, one thing that I've learned through the years, and this is maybe this ties in with your asking about challenges. It's delegating in general, just delegating responsibility and being able to build a team and things like that. I mean, that is 100% a challenge as any organization scales. For me, I was used to doing everything myself in the early days, and it was a bit of a control freak as a result. It was like I wanted to do the marketing for this, or I want to write the copy for this. I want to, make this, album cover myself, or whatever.
Right.
But then over time, especially as I brought in the team, I brought in management, I brought in, agents, brought in legal, brought in a business manager, all the things that you need to run a business. And then, I started to learn how to delegate some of these things, certainly things that I wasn't naturally good at, that was easy to delegate. And then in time, as the organization grew and we started doing some tours that were simultaneous tours, even, where we would have a group in Europe and another cast of musicians in the United States, it became important to bring on show directors, an artistic director, to work with the cast and all these other, different positions, social media people, things like that, people to run our online store. And, that is all learning experience too. And that's something where you have to find people that you trust that can really deliver and still stay part of the process. I think it's a very good thing to know how all these things work, like how to do these things. I'm so grateful that I got the experience to learn everything from recording technology to marketing, just as a matter of doing, these things in the early days, because I was able to learn the principles. And now when I have people on my team that I've delegated those responsibilities to, I can actually, I can speak their language a bit.
Yeah, that is such a hard thing for so many entrepreneurs to give up the thinking that they have to do everything themselves. But you were actually able to scale, right? And become more successful and grow because you turned over so many of those aspects.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that's something that you need to, I talk about in my book. I talked about just being a perfectionist. And that was something that can be a barrier, I believe, for a lot of artists just from releasing their own stuff. And it can also be a barrier from delegating responsibilities because somebody does something not exactly the same way that you would have done it. And you have to be able to make peace with that.
Right. So tell us about the book. So when did you decide to write a book?
Well, that was kind of like, I guess, the book it was such a amazing experience for me. And I wanted to, write it sooner than later while everything was still fresh in my mind. Uh, Basically, I think I started it in 2000, it was 2017. Maybe it was 2016, actually. It was soon after we did Radio City Music Hall. For me, Radio City Music Hall, I mean, that like meant that I had arrived in a sense, because it was
That's when
something
you felt it?
well, kind of. I don't know. I mean, I guess you're always in the process of arriving or whatever it means. But when I was a kid, I would walk around New York City, like in high school. We'd go and listen to jazz clubs, and we'd walk and you'd pass places like Radio City Music Hall, and you just think like you'd see the bill and stuff, and you'd be like, man, it must be awesome to be a musician that gets to do these kind of places, these historic venues, and it was something to aspire to. And so then it's a crazy feeling to actually get to do that, and, to see your name up there. And, how weird is that?
Right.
So, I think that I wanted to start writing about all these experiences and just so I could kind of remember them and then also be able to recount all the steps that I took. And since it happened in such an organic fashion, it was a completely grassroots type of thing. I thought that it would be valuable for other, not just musicians, but other entrepreneurs, anybody that's a creative entrepreneur, because the steps that I took are all the steps that any entrepreneur would take. It's developing proof of concept, it's figuring out how to scale the business, it's, monetizing, it's all those kind of things. So I found that there was a lot of parallels between, my own kind of journey as a musician and entrepreneurs, what they do with a startup.
Right. So the name of the book is?
It's Outside the Jukebox, and the subtitle is like How I Turned My Vintage Obsession into My Dream Gig.
And you can definitely get that on Amazon.
Vintage music obsession, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, and that was, I mean, it was fun telling the stories too, because we have just fun stories from the road. I mean, it's a band, like it's always going to be entertaining. You got crazy characters, you got all these fun people to be around. So,
Right.
I had no shortage of stories.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. But before I let you go, is there, one main, I guess, concept from the book or one thing that you have on your mind that would be some good parting advice for the entrepreneurs that listen to my show?
Yeah, well, I think that, to go back to the thing that I said about perfectionism, and that was a point that actually I wrote a chapter about in my book, and it resonated with a lot of people. They had reached out, and a lot of people that read the book that said that part really resonated with them. Perfectionism can be a good thing in that it means that you're constantly evaluating your own work and you're looking for ways to improve. But it can also be kind of taken to a pathological extreme where you're afraid to put anything out into the world just because you don't believe that it's ready yet or it's not good enough. And I'm sure that this is something that really plagues artists a lot because we're always a work in progress. There's art is really never done. And I think it's really helpful to look at your work as an artist as okay, this is a snapshot in time. This is how I performed this song. Like maybe I wouldn't perform it the same way now, but this is how I performed it then. And you have to always recognize that it's almost selfish to not release work that you've done to the public that is looking for it. And that's kind of how you have to frame it. And similarly, if you're a creative entrepreneur, kind of the same rules apply. You don't want to be constantly tinkering with your product and trying to make everything perfect. I mean, obviously you should in some respects, but it shouldn't. Don't let the obsession, derail the goal. It was only a kiss. Now I'm falling asleep, and she's calling a cab while he's taking a smoke, and she's having a drive.
Wow. What an amazing story of success and perseverance. Hopefully, we can all see Scott live soon as live events return, that is. But in the meantime, find links, you guys, to all of his social media in our show notes. And also, there'll be a link in there to the musician rescue kit that he talked about. I just think getting this rescue kit out to any struggling musician we know would really help people. So please go into our show notes and send them the link. Thank you for joining us today on this episode. Without your support, our show does not grow. So please share this episode, rate and review our podcast on Apple. Until next time, everyone, stay scrappy.